We're sticking with our effort to describe mechanisms to sort of fix the problems of observational studies. And a big one, and I think a rather intuitive one, is known as matching. So let's go through matching. Our goals here is to discuss what matching is. It's a very specialized form of adjustment. And we'll talk about why it may be useful and, of course, how it may not be as useful as you think. Of course, if we're talking about matching, it makes me think of matchmaking, which makes me think of speed dating. And I think an example of speed dating might be the perfect introduction to talk about how matching works.
So when you're doing an observational study, matching is a really tempting idea. The thought here is you take someone who's got the exposure of interest and you find an unexposed person who is like them in every conceivable way. You know, they're doppelganger, and then you follow to see who does better in the long term. And in theory, this sounds really great. It controls for all those unmeasured confounders we talked about, but in practice, it's actually quite hard. It reminds me kind of speed dating, but like for narcissists. You're not really trying to find someone you like, you're trying to find someone who is like you. So, for example, hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Are you between the ages of 38 and 42 years?
No.
Then this isn't gonna work. And it gets harder and harder the more factors you're trying to match on. For example, hi.
Hi.
Do you attend Yale University?
Yes, I do.
Perfect, so do I. And are you living in the suburbs of Connecticut?
No, I'm not.
Afraid that's not gonna work, I'm sorry. And what do you do with people that you can't find a match for? Do you just throw them out of the study? And how might throwing those types of people out of the study actually bias the results? Oh my goodness, New York Times bestselling author and host of Slate's Political Gabfest, Emily Bazelon. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
I'm so
That's
excited
nice.
you're here. Thank you. And are you a faculty member at Yale University?
I'm a lecturer at the law school. Does that count?
Yeah, I think we'll give it to you.
Okay.
And do you have between 2 and 4 children?
I do.
Just like me. And were you born at Yale New Haven Hospital?
No, I was born in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, this isn't gonna work. But thank you anyway. That was hard. Okay, this one seems promising. Hi.
Hi.
So, are you a white male between the ages of 38 and 42?
I am.
And do you live in the suburbs of Connecticut?
I do.
And do you have a minivan that you spend way too much time in?
Yes.
And do your kids always beg for chocolate at the same time every night and it's like always a fight?
Oh my God, every night.
I think we have a match. This is perfect. And that is how matching works.
Okay, did you see that? Did you see that there? Right, this is a bit unusual speed dating. Matching in statistics is like trying to not find a partner who complements you, but to find an exact copy of yourself. Matching is like speed dating for narcissists. So let's talk about how it actually works in a study. So, every pregnant woman is unique, right? Well, not necessarily, according to this study. This was a study that looked to see if induction of labor in pregnant women was associated with C-section rates. So induction of labor, you'll remember, is if a woman is pregnant, they give her medications to sort of induce labor, to start labor going. But there was this concern, like if we do that, will the C-section rate go up because, you know, maybe the woman's body is not quite ready to give birth or something like that. So this was a concern. And so what the researchers did is they took a big data set from Flanders, and they found that the C-section rate in women who had induction of labor was 9.9%. So if we just had that data point, we'd say, okay, 9.9%. Is that good? Is it bad? Well, you'd want to know, like, what's the normal rate, you know? And in fact, it turns out that you need to know the normal rate in Flanders because C-section rates are crazy variable across the world, like from 2% in some places to like 80% in some places. It's really crazy. But if you looked in Flanders, you would find that the average rate of C-section, just kind of taking all women together, was about 5%. So that makes that 9.9% seem pretty high. It's like a doubling of the rate of C-section in the women who were induced. But we need to think about causality. Is it the induction of labor? Is it giving those medications that led to the C-section or not? What could be causing the 10% rate in the women who were induced? So let's remember that confounding exists. Third factors that could be linked both to induction and to C-section. So what factors could be confounders of this relationship? Well, maybe socioeconomic status. Maybe women of higher means are more likely to get induced because they want kind of the scheduling or something like that. Maybe they're also more likely to have a C-section. Maybe age, the kind of older women or something like that are more likely to get induced, more likely to have a C-section, or less likely to get induced and less likely to have a C-section. So there are a number of potential confounders here. And as we talked about in the adjustment lecture, you could, collect them all and do your statistical adjustments and try to get to sort of the true relationship between induction and C-section. But that's not the way these researchers went. These researchers decided to use matching. So they found 7,683 women who had elective induction of labor and matched them to 7,683 women who had spontaneous labor, who were not induced. And they matched on several parameters, including which labor ward they were in, the maternal age, the gestational age, how far along they were in the pregnancy, the birth weight of the infant, and the sex of the infant. So multiple factors. And they paired these people together, just like speed dating. And they said, okay, you're the same age, you had the same sex child, they were the same weight when they were born, and you were in the same maternity ward, but one of you got induced and one of you didn't, so we're going to follow you forward to see what the different rate is. Now, this is a very intuitive approach, right? Because it actually removes multiple potential confounders at once. If the population, for example, is matched on age, then age can't be a confounder. Why? Well, remember, confounders have to be associated with the exposure and the outcome. If the population is matched based on age, then the age is, by definition, the same in the induced women and the non-induced women. If the age is the same, it's not associated with induction because it's the same. It is not a confounder. So you have eliminated age as a potential confounder. That's good. Matching also feels good because one-to-one matching kind of like has some intuitive appeal. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I sort of like it. It's like we got 7,000 women here and 7,000 women here, and they're all stuck together. But you don't have to do one-to-one matching. There's nothing that says you can't do 1-to-2 matching or 1-to-10 matching or 1-to-100 matching. Just a note, if your study design is matched, your statistical test has to account for the matching in some way. Y'all don't have to worry about that, but if you ever read the methods section of a matched study, you'll see something that says, hey, we accounted for the matching by doing X, Y, and Z. But matching feels a little bit better than it is, right? Just because we found a woman of the same age, labor ward, and with the same sex of the baby does not mean she is the same in every other way, right? In fact, she could be quite different because every pregnant woman is unique. So the fact that you match these are not identical twins, right? This is a woman who is similar in a few ways, but not every way. So it does not account for any unmeasured confounders. So you still have confounders that you didn't match for that you need to account for. And of course, unmeasured confounders you can never account for. So this is not a panacea. This doesn't fix all your problems, but it is one thing that helps a little bit. And of course, the other problem is, what if you can't find a match, right? Like, what if there is no woman of your age who is on your labor ward who had the same sex infant, right? And so you might not be able to find a match. And in fact, you may imagine that the more things you try to match on, the harder and harder it is to find a match. So some studies that use matching will just throw the women out of the study if there's no match for them. And that makes it a little bit difficult to interpret the results because then the results have to be interpreted in the context of like, well, here's the effect of induction of labor on C-section rates among women that we could find a match for, which is a really sort of unique population. So be aware of that when you're reading a study about matching. Is there something that says, how many people we couldn't match and whatever happened to those people? All right. Why should you use matching? Well, if you have enough sample size, if you have a big enough study, honestly, adjustment works just fine. And the sort of appeal of matching is more in the heart than in the mind, I think. And statisticians have shown that multivariable adjustment really works pretty much as well to undercover the underlying relationship as matching does. So matching is better for smaller studies. You may imagine you want to do, like, let's say a new expensive test to diagnose cancer and it costs a lot of money. You have to have a small study. You might take 100 people with the cancer and 100 other people that look as much like them as you could possibly find so that you're just doing a 200 patient study of this new diagnostic test. So you'll often see matching used when you've got kind of small numbers and you're just trying to get a sense of whether something works or not. There's also a concept you need to be aware of called overmatching, which occurs when you match on a factor that is causally downstream of the exposure of interest. So I'm going to give you an extreme example. Let's imagine I'm curious whether hitting myself in the head with a hammer would cause brain damage, okay? So what I could do is I could take a bunch of people who hit themselves with the head and the hammer and see what their brain damage rate is. What if I match them to other people and one of my matching characteristics was having a bloody head, okay? Well, then I'm overmatching, right? Because I'm going to get this population of matched people who all have bloody heads, and I don't know why they have bloody heads, but probably they're going to have a higher rate of brain damage because they've got a bloody head, okay? What happened is I matched on something that is downstream causally of my exposure of interest. My exposure of interest, the hammer to the head, bleeding head, is causally downstream of hitting myself in the head with a hammer. And that will tend to make my exposure look like it is not associated with the outcome. So be a little careful if you match on things that you think are the result of the exposure, as opposed to things that are just present at the time of the exposure. Take-home points today: matching is a way to account for confounding. It's not the only way. It's not perfect. It can help infer causality, but it cannot prove causality, just like adjustment and any method to deal with observational data. And really, if you had enough sample size, adjustment probably works fine. You don't always need to use matching, but you can if you'd like. See you next time.